Okay, in this video we want to talk about inverse trig functions. So, you know, inverse means the opposite. So we've talked about trig functions, and you know that when you're solving a problem looking for the side of a triangle, you set up the problem using a trig ratio, and then you solve the problem using a proportion. So for example, if we have this problem, we have a right triangle and we're missing the hypotenuse. So we've got this angle 27 and this side of 4. So when we have one side and it's the opposite of the angle and we're looking for the hypotenuse, we're looking for the sine, where we use the sine. So we would say that sine is the opposite of the hypotenuse. So we could say sine of 27 equals 4 over x. So if we're trying to solve this, we can multiply that x and we get x times the sine of 27 equals 4. And we're still trying to solve to get x alone, so we have to divide both sides by the sine of 27. So we're going to get x equals 4 divided by the sine of 27. And then when we go into our calculator, and again, make sure that you're in the degree mode. So we would do 4 divided by the sine of 27, and we find out that x is equal to 8.810. Okay, so let's say we're looking for an angle. We know the sides, we know some of the angles, but we're looking for a missing angle. So in this case, we would need to use the inverse of a sine function. And of course, the inverse of the sine function is when we see these sine -1 or cosine -1 or tangent -1 above the sine, cosine, and tangent button on our calculator. We use the second button to get there. So when you're solving a problem looking for an angle of the triangle, you still set up the problem using a trig ratio, and you solve the problem using an inverse trig ratio. So let's look at how this works. So let's say we have this problem where we know the sides are 3 and 5, but we're missing this angle. We would say the sine still equals opposite over the hypotenuse, but this time instead of saying the sine of some number equals 3 over 5, we're going to say the sine of x equals 3 over 5. So we're going to say that x equals sine -1 of 3 of 5. So when we put it in our calculator, we're going to do second sine of -1, which we also call the arc sine. And then we're going to put in 3 divided by 5. And we find out that this angle equals 36.8 degrees, 0.87, 0.9 degrees. So we can say that x is about 37 degrees. Okay, so let's look at B. Look at which ones we know. Here's our angle. We have the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. So adjacent and the hypotenuse, that's cosine. So we can set it up as cosine of x equals 5 over 13. So we would say that x equals cosine -1 or arc cosine of 5 over 13. So again, when you put it in your calculator, you do second cosine 5 divided by 13, and you get 67.3, or about 67 degrees. And it's okay to round these up or down because with degrees, a whole number works well. Looking at this one, my hypotenuse is not involved at all. When your hypotenuse is not involved, then you know you're typically looking for the tangent. So you just need to look at where your angle is, look at your opposite and your adjacent. So you have tangent -1 or arctangent of 10 over 24. So in this case, x is going to equal 22.6 or 23 degrees. All right, and then our last one, this time we have opposite and hypotenuse. So we would say the arc sine or the inverse of the sine, and 3 over 6, which we know would simplify to be a half. So in this case, it's going to be 30. And it's not about 30, it is 30. Alright, so this is how we use the inverse trig ratio. And again, we hit the second, and then it's located above the sine, cosine, and tangent function. Okay, so let's do a couple more. When we go to solve for this one, look, this is like what we did originally. We're not looking for an angle in this case, we're looking for an actual side. So this isn't an inverse trig function, this is a regular trig function. Here's our hypotenuse, we don't need that, we're looking for the adjacent side with our opposite. So in this case, we know it's tangent of 23 equals, here's adjacent, opposite over adjacent, 12 over x. And we haven't done a lot of these. When your x is on the bottom, there's an extra step. So you know to solve an equation, you multiply x over here. But you still have to divide away to get x alone. So we divide by tangent of 23, and we get x is going to equal whatever 12 over the tangent of 23 is. I don't know what I just did, 12 divided by tangent of 23. X equals 28.27. And then this last one, we are looking for an angle. Again, our hypotenuse is not involved, so it means it's tangent. So we're doing the arctangent of opposite over adjacent, 11 over 16. So tangent -1 of 11. We get x is going to equal 34.5, so your angle is about 35 degrees. And that's how you use the inverse trig function.